All right, everyone awake? Everyone enjoying your life with finals? Alright, so it's going to be a pretty quick class today. And there's not too much to talk about, really. Okay, let's go to the schedule. I made a little module for the final, so it's right there. Get out of here. Okay, so final. So this week we have the final review, and then next week will be the actual final. So I'll talk about the schedule. All right. Oh yeah. So I guess before that, the shear stress or double shear, that memo, is that due today? No, next week. Yeah, sorry. Okay, double shear, that's due next week, so on the 16th. But hopefully, you get that done well before then, because I know you got finals, so hopefully you can get that done this week. It's pretty simple, I think. It's just the results section and the discussion section. That's all you have to do. So that's, the little kind of mini procedure in the results section, the results, and then the discussion. That's it. Okay, let's go back. Yeah, sorry. Even my weeks are messed up right now. Okay, so that's due next week, the last memo. And then we're going to have the final on that same day. So the final, that's going to be a full day I'm going to give you. I still make the final to be within the kind of the time constraints of the actual final. So that's, 2 hours, 50 minutes. Even that's a really long time. It's not going to take that long. But I'm going to give you a full day just because, I don't know, why not? Just to make it a little less stressful. And so that's going to be online. It's not going to be in person. So basically, once we get to this time next week, I'll have the final that it's going to be automatically posted at 8:30 a.m. You're going to have a full day to work on it, and then you'll submit it online as well. So for that, it's going to be, I'll give you a PDF for the final. And if you want, you can print it out and you can write on it, by hand. And then you can, take a picture, or really I would prefer it that you scan it, and then you can upload your final that way. So I know some people, they just prefer writing by hand. So you can do that. Or if you have whatever kind of tablet, you can download the final onto your tablet, and then you can write that way. You can do it like that. Or you can type stuff out. So you still need to type it out kind of onto the PDF itself. So, I think you can, if you have Adobe Reader, you can actually edit the PDF document and you can type in there whatever method you want to use, right? So you can either write by hand, write on your tablet, or you can type stuff out. But it's got to be on the PDF itself. So for that, it's obviously not it's gonna look like a normal test that you would have. So I'll have each question, there's going to be a good amount of space for you to type stuff out or write, and you can do it like that. Okay, but I should have talked about that part later. So before we talk about the final a bit more, SOQs, they are due by this Friday, so that's the Student Opinion Questionnaire. You should see that on the homepage when you go into fullerton.edu. On the very on the homepage, you should see a little section for SOQs, and I'm sure you've been spammed too for your email from the school as well. So fill those out by this Friday, because that's when they're due, and I'm gonna spam you with an email as well tomorrow probably, and I can check too the response rate that we have for the class. So I know it's a little annoying, right, to fill them out, but really it takes you 2 minutes per class to fill out. So just fill it out, because it does help a lot. And yeah, so fill that out. And this class also has an indirect assessment survey, is what they call it, and that's also due by this Friday. So you should have received an email for that as well. So check your email for the SOQs and this indirect assessment survey. And that survey, that'll take you, I don't know, 30 seconds to fill out. It's very fast. Okay, so study guide, we'll talk about that in a second. That's what you see here. So the final exam, I think I already said all of this, but I'll say it really quick again. The final exam is next week for this class. It's going to be online, so I'm going to upload it, or it's going to be posted automatically at 8:30 a.m. It's going to open up then. You can download the PDF, and you're going to submit your final online as well. So basically, I'll make an assignment for that. The medium for completion, you can print out the final, you can write out your answers by hand, you can scan it, upload it to Canvas, you can do it that way, or you can use a tablet, or you can type out your answers, whatever. And obviously it's got to be individual work only. So I'm giving you a full day, right? So at least have the decency to work on it by yourself. And it is obvious too if you're, if you have the same exact answer as someone else. So just don't cheat. You got a full day. Just work on it by yourself. Okay. And so now for the study guide. The study guide is going to be a lot like the final, the questions on here. So basically, it's not going to be all of these questions because that would be way too long to write everything out. Basically, like I guess 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, whatever it was, I had a final for this class, and everyone, if they were writing it out by hand, it was in person back then, the entire class, and it took like a really long time. So that's because I had too many questions. So anyways, there's a lot of things on this study guide here. I'm not going to have all of these questions on the final, but I'm going to have some of them. And I might add some other questions that I think of, in between then. But they're going to be similar, at least in style, to the questions that you see here. My eyesight's going out. I should have my glasses on or something. Okay, anyways, so we'll talk about the study guide a bit. I'm not going to give you the answers to it right now. It's a study guide. You got to work on it yourself. But these are the kind of questions that you should expect to see on the final. So basically, I try to make this final. Hold on, let me turn my light. It's really dark. Okay, so I try to make this final related to the labs. So I don't want to give you just an entire final of like theoretical math questions, basically. I think that's very silly for a lab to do it like that. So I try to make these questions related to the lab. So if we look through here, that's what you should see. So for sure, this question is going to be in the final. Basically, I'll give you like a stress strain diagram, and you're going to have to label certain points of interest or regions. So like the elastic range, the proportional limit, the yield point, UTS, fracture point, stuff like that. So that'll for sure be on there just because that's an obvious question to have. Next one, the elastic range versus plastic range. So that'll be like for a stress strain diagram again. You'll look at that. And then you'll tell me the difference between them. So kind of define that on your own. Yield strength and why it's sometimes used over a yield point. So we had that in the first lab where we used an offset method and we defined a yield strength. So you need to discuss what it is and why it's sometimes used over a yield point. Necking, so this is like the first lab again when we had our tension test. So you can define necking and what kind of materials that occurs for. So it's only some materials that this occurs for. And then how an extensometer measures strain versus how a strain gauge measures strain. So this one is a very, kind of clear one for me, kind of ensuring that everyone was paying attention in the lab and was involved. So discuss how the extensometer basically works and how the strain gauge works. Benefits and negatives of the extensometer and the strain gauge. That was a topic for one of your memos, so hopefully you did a good job on that part. Where would you place the dial gauge when measuring the maximum deflection for a simply supported beam? So that's just like our lab. So where did we put that dial gauge to measure the deflection, and why did we put it at that specific location? Okay, importance of effective length and how it's determined. So that's lab 4. That was for the column. So basically, I'll kind of have the question for where you define what effective length is and why it's important and how we calculate it. Okay. Remember, that was from the end supports that we have. And there's an equation depending on the end support that we have. Okay, importance of radius of gyration for stability. So that was another topic that we had for the column. So basically, look at the formula that we have for radius of gyration and what the kind of parameters are for that, and think about how that relates to the stability of a column. I really like the column lab, by the way, so there's for sure going to be a few questions on that for the final. Okay, difference of short columns, intermediate columns, and long columns. So, remember that isn't just arbitrary. We used effective length, or we used the slenderness ratio, rather, to define them. And so, kind of think about it more than just this. So, obviously that's important, but think about how these different columns, how they fail, and how they look like when they fail. So think about basically everything that we did in the lab for these different columns. Okay, difference of normal stress, compressive stress, shear stress, and bearing stress. Kind of a boring question, but we had all of these different types of stress in our labs throughout the semester. Okay, fracture surface appearance for a brittle material and a ductile material. And basically think about that for all of our experiments where we had some kind of failure that occurred. So that would be the first lab, our tension test. That would be the column. Okay, that was it either failed from yield stress or from stability failure. And then the 5th lab, that was the Charpy impact. And then the 6th lab, that was the double shear test. All right, and then this is a pretty general question here, number 14. So, overview of each experiment, that would be the objectives and general procedures. So I might have a question where I say, what were the objectives for this experiment and what was the general procedure? So as an example for experiment 1, maybe I wrote this a while ago, so maybe I would make it a little bit better now. I don't know. But experiment 1, as an example, obviously I'm not going to have this as a question now for experiment 1. But, we had a tension test. We used the MTS tensile testing machine. We had it for 3 different materials. I don't care if you say the actual materials here. I mean, that part isn't really important for this kind of question. But yeah, we had 3 different materials. We obtained a stress strain diagram by converting our load and deformation data. So we converted that to stress and strain to gain insight on the material properties itself. And to do this, we used an extensometer that was attached in the middle of the specimen. Okay, and that was used to obtain the deformation data, which we could use to get strain. And this last part, that part's not too important. But yeah, so, I don't want you to have like a super detailed kind of procedure thing, that's not very realistic for a question. I just want to make sure that you actually understand what we did and what the objectives were. So, like a short paragraph, something like this. Okay, next one is possible sources of error for each experiment and how they directly affect the results for each experiment. That part is important. So, and you might see this for some of my comments in your memos. So sometimes, people, they'll say, yeah, whatever, this was a source of error, and they don't really talk about how it affected the results, and that part is important. So, and this is another good question for me to see that all of you were active in each lab and you were actually helping and you were involved. So basically, I can give you some random experiment. Let's say like experiment 4. I'll ask you to tell me what some possible sources of error were and how they would directly affect your results. So for experiment 4, I'm not going to give you the answer, but remember, one of the things was the end supports. That was one source of error. So you list that as one, and you would need to tell me how those end supports, if there were any issues with them, how they would directly affect your results for that experiment. Okay, so yeah, you would list a few. I think for that lab, there was a few sources of error. So I'd want to see that. And then the last thing is know how to do some basic calculations to solve for normal stress, normal strain. So this is basically like labs 1 and 2. Bending stress, that would be like lab 3. And then column deflection and critical stress for columns, that's lab 4. So for this part, I'm going to have either 1 or 2 questions for calculating, very basic things like this. It's going to be a basic question, but I feel like there should still be at least 1 question where we calculate something like this. So it's probably just going to be 1 question where you need to calculate, so like normal stress, I'll give you some dimensions of like a rod or something. I'll give you a loading for it and maybe some deformation data, and you will calculate the stress and the strain. So it'll be simple, but it's still a good way to make sure that you actually know what you're doing. Alright, so that's the study guide. I know that there's a lot of things here, but if you were paying attention in the lab and you were actually involved, you wouldn't even need to fill the study guide out. You could just do the final easy peasy, right? But definitely, you have a whole week now to look at this study guide and fill it out by yourself and make sure that you understand everything on here, and you're going to breeze through the final. So the final, really, it should be an easy way for you to get a lot of points. So make sure you just fill this study guide out, and you'll do very well on the final for sure. So are there any questions on the study guide or the final or really anything in the lab? No? Alright. Well, then that's it for today. So it's pretty quick. Just take a look at the study guide again, and for other reminders, your last memo, that's due next week as well. SOQs, they are due by this Friday, so tomorrow. And this indirect assessment survey is also due by tomorrow. So again, please fill them out. And I'm going to send you an email as well tomorrow. But fill them out, fill them out right after this class, right? It's already on your mind and it's very fast. Just do it. Alright, so if there are no questions, there's one more thing. So next week, when I have the final uploaded, I will be in Zoom for the duration of the final, for the 2 hours, 50 minutes, not a whole day. Not doing that. So if you have any questions, you can go on Zoom if you want, but really, I don't think you'll have any questions, but if you do, I'll be in there, or Discord. I'll be there available pretty much the whole day. All right, so anyways, that's it then. That's it for the class, really. So next week we have the final, and most likely I'm not gonna, see anyone in Zoom then. So I want to thank you guys for a good semester. It was good that I could actually see you in person for the labs, and it wasn't entirely just online. So yeah, thank you for the good semester. And I know it's some things were kind of not totally smooth because we had the new software this semester and we were finally going back in person for the labs. But yeah, it was a good semester. So thank you guys, and I'll still be available on Discord to answer any questions for the final memo and then the final. All right. But that's it for today, and I guess that's it kind of for the semester. So I'll maybe see you around or maybe not. But anyways, good luck on your finals, and yeah, we'll see you maybe next week. All right. See you guys.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Professor.
much.
Mm-hmm.